Pillar number 4 is fasting in Ramadan. This is the 9th month of the Muslim calendar, and complicatedly enough, the Muslim calendar is a lunar calendar. Each month begins with the sighting of the new crescent moon. And this means that the Muslim year of 12 of these months is a little bit shorter than the Gregorian calendar. It's about 355 and a bit days. So what this means is that the month of Ramadan falls a little bit earlier each year. So sometimes it's in the summer, sometimes in the winter. At the moment it falls in the month of January. In northern latitudes, obviously, the fast is sometimes going to be a lot longer than it is in equatorial regions, because it's a dawn to dusk fast. In England, I remember 15, 16 years ago, the fast was in the summer, and we were starting the fast at 2:30 a.m. and then we would slump in front of the television watching cricket all day, and fortunately the test matches go on quite late in the evening, and then we would break the fast at 9:45 in the evening. Now that seems to be onerous, but in fact there's a kind of balance involved, because in equatorial regions the real problem is not the time but the heat. You get thirsty, whereas in England generally you don't get thirsty, so there's a kind of compensation now. Obviously there are exemptions if you're a quarry worker or you're a pregnant woman, for instance, or a number of other things, or also many people will say if you're about to take exams you're exempted from fasting, and you can do various things like either making up the fast later in the year, or you can pay a cash equivalent to the poor. The actual sighting of the moon is a notorious controversy in Muslim communities, particularly in the West. The traditional schools of Islamic law insist that the crescent moon has to be physically sighted, and that the fasting month begins at dawn the following day. Increasingly in the Muslim world, people are using computer calculations and tables from observatories to work this out. But a traditional scene in a Muslim village, for instance, would be people going out after the sunset prayer and going up on top of a local hill, or even sitting on the roof of the mosque, and they sit around and drink tea and they look for the moon, and it's quite a festive occasion. Once one member of the community has sighted the moon, then Ramadan begins and the fast commences the next morning. The fast, as I said, is from first light, which is when the horizon first becomes visible, which is the time when the first adhan of the day is given. And it ends at sunset with the adhan for the sunset prayer. In a lot of Muslim countries, they have a canon that announces the exact moment when you can start drinking your can of Coke or whatever it is you wish to break the fast with. In Muslim cities in Ramadan, you can sometimes see large ceremonial cannons mounted in public parks and so forth, and they emit a satisfying bang at precisely the right moment. The rules of the fast are: while fasting, Muslim men and women equally are required to abstain from food, drink, smoking, and all sexual relations. But there are a number of other dimensions. The hadith also urge more rigorous observance of the rules of right conduct. For instance, we find a hadith saying 5 things break the fast: lying, backbiting, slander, swearing, and looking with lust. The purpose of fasting is really not different from the purpose of fasting in other religions, and I think all the major world religions have rites of fasting. The purpose is quite simply to briefly cut the believer off from physical ties to the world. Like the angels, the fasting person neither eats nor drinks. The aim is to create a sense of aloofness and independence from material passions and pleasures, enabling one to focus on God without distraction. More practically, it has the effect of teaching the wealthy what it's like to be hungry, thereby inculcating a sense of solidarity and charity. Partly for this reason, there's a special form of zakat which is given at the end or towards the end of the month of Ramadan, called the zakat al-fitr. So we'll write this out. Again, an obligation, not onerous. It's calculated at approximately 3 litres of wheat or barley for every man, woman and child in a household. Literalist Muslims will say the Prophet gave it in wheat and barley, therefore we have to. So sometimes in Ramadan in Muslim cities you'll see people sitting out selling piles of wheat and barley. But increasingly nowadays people will just give a cash equivalent. In Ramadan, charitable and family activities are hugely important. The fast-breaking meal at sundown, the iftar, as I-F-T-A-R, is a major social occasion. Typically, some of the men in the family will break the fast at the mosque by eating a few dates and perhaps a gulp of water. They will pray and then go home, and then there will be an opportunity for entertaining guests. Feeding the poor is particularly stressed during Ramadan. This was the practice of the Prophet. And there's often a very general public enthusiasm for doing this. I remember once I was in Cairo in Ramadan, and I visited the office of the NBC bureau chief, and it was getting towards the end of the day, and he said, "I know a really great place to have a meal. Why don't you come with me?" And I thought, great, I get a free meal at the Meridian or somewhere. So I said, fine. And he took me in his car to the poorest, most run-down slum in Cairo. And we sat down on the street, on these sort of rush mats, and there was a public banquet being given for the poor of that district by the local mosque, which was done in that area every evening for everybody, and it was free of charge. And we had a great meal, open to everybody, and I certainly enjoyed myself more than I would have done at the Meridian. But that's a typical sight in Muslim cities in Ramadan. Also inviting the neighbours, inviting the poor amongst one's neighbours, etc. After eating, there is the no less important business of the night prayers, and these are followed by the most important religious ritual of the fasting month, the famous prayers of Taraweeh. These are not obligatory, but in practice a lot of people attend them. And ideally in each mosque the imam should recite the entire Quran throughout in the month, so you'll find a 30th part of the Quran being recited in the Taraweeh prayers every evening. The reason for this is that according to the Quran, the revelation was actually sent down from heaven during the month of Ramadan. So this is like a recollection of that. Taraweeh prayers, typically 20 rakahs. Devotional practices are also very much stressed. We're told that the nights in Ramadan are a time of particular holiness and spiritual potential. And there's something called the Night of Power, Laylat al-Qadr, referred to in Surah 97 of the Quran, which reads, "We have sent it," i.e. the Quran, "down on the night of power. What will convey to you what the night of power is? The night of power is better than 1,000 months. On that night the angels and the Spirit come down by their Lord's leave with every decree. Peace it is until the rising of the dawn." Now, a hadith refuses to specify exactly when the night of power might be, but tells us to seek it during the last odd-numbered nights of Ramadan. Very typically, people believe it to be the night of the 27th. This is a time of solitary, all-night vigils, Quranic recitation, meditation, and prayer. Spiritually minded people believe that the fath, the spiritual opening, is most likely to be granted at that time. Shortly afterwards, the month ends with one of the two great Muslim festivals. This is the Eid al-Fitr. Eid means a festival, and Eid al-Fitr is the one that happens the day after the last fasting day. And as with the other Muslim festival, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, this is canonically very simple. After saying the dawn prayer, people will go off to a large place, not necessarily just the local mosque, but traditionally it has to be the largest mosque of a city or even an open space. In English cities, we often use public paths, public parks. This will be, say, 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. And theoretically, the entire community attends, men, women, and children. And there's a short sermon and a short prayer, and then people go back home, visit relations, take the day off. Presents are exchanged. Traditionally, people wear new clothes. Kids get new clothes on the Eid, and so forth. That brings Ramadan to a close, but one should be aware also that Muslims have other times of fasting. For instance, some pious people might follow the Prophet's example and fast every Monday and Thursday. Sometimes people fast the middle 3 days of each month. The day of Ashura, which is the Muslim extension of the Jewish Mosaic fast of Yom Kippur, is also observed in Islam, and there are several others.